This is the Emergency Medical Minute, sponsored by Mile High Ambulance. The Emergency Medical Minute is excited to announce that we are now offering AMA, PRA, Category 1 credits. This is accessible through our online course modules that can be accessed at www.emergencymedicalminute.org/CME-courses, or simply by clicking on the link in our show notes and creating an account.
So my medical minute today is a tale of two soldiers, two kids, and two products. And the products are called Le Sac and Le Flap. And I'm not making up the product names either. So let's start with the two soldiers. So back in 1872, this guy named William Barr was born. He was a surgeon, an orthopedist in Hopkins. I think there's a couple Hopkins people here. And so he was a large man described as being overweight and puffy. Puffy was the term in 1800s for being fat. He walked around smoking a cigar. When he went into the OR, the nurse had to take the cigar out of his mouth and put it out so he could operate. So as it turns out, in 1917, he went to as a consulting physician in World War I when he came across two soldiers. Two soldiers were injured, lying on the ground in the field for about a week. They ended up with gruesome leg injuries. And when they were brought to his medical facility, they found them both with maggots in both legs, which you say, oh, gross, that's nasty. But William Barr noted that he thought there was beautiful pink granulation tissue, even though the legs were swarmed with maggots. So he observed this and he said, well, I have all these people I'm doing amputations on, and the people without maggots look kind of gruesome. The people who had maggots, their granulation tissue actually looked pretty good. So he started cultivating maggots on the windowsills in Hopkins and would actually apply them to patients' legs to help sort of debride and get all the gooiness and nastiness out. Now, as it turns out, there was a couple problems because his maggots weren't that sterile and a couple of his patients died of tetanus. And then shortly after he started doing that in 1930s and 40s, what new thing came out that made us not have to use maggots? Yeah, the penicillins. So maggots fell out of favor for a while. So move forward back into the mid-2000s. Here's a randomized controlled study in Israel where they take 723 patients and they apply maggots actually to diabetic foot wounds. And actually the maggots did a pretty good job. 82% of the people have complete debridement, 16% had partial debridement, and only 1% were ineffective. Some people described a discomfort, 38% of the patients. So anyway, the maggots target the dead flesh. They don't have teeth. They don't bite or chomp. They kind of secrete some enzymes that help dissolve stuff, and they slurp up all the goo. That's medical terms. So actually, some of the secretions will kill MRSA. They cause angiogenesis, so formation of blood vessels, and they bring in fibroblasts. So that lays down the matrix for creating new tissue. So that's my two soldiers. Now, two kids. If you have kids, and imagine one is 3 and one is 12, the 3-year-old, if you put some maggots in their hand, they'll go, cool, this is awesome. If you put maggots in a 12-year-old kid's hand, they'll be like, oh, gross. So as it turns out, a lot of people don't want to have maggots, even though they might be beneficial. A 2017 study, there's, I think 30% of the patients said they'd rather have an amputation than have maggots applied. I mean, I don't want an amputation. I don't really want maggots, but I'd rather take the maggots than the amputation. The most common side effect of maggots, this is described as a nipping or picking sensation. That's only in 5 to 30% of the people. So if you figure doing debridement with, scissors, that's still 30% of the people don't like that. So it's probably no worse than regular old debridement. The problem with maggots, of course, is right when you apply them, they like to escape. And no one wants escaped maggots in the hospital. So that brings us to two products. So in your spare time, Google this, monarchlabs.com. They have two things. One is called Le Sac, and the other is called Le Flap. And I'm not joking. I'm not making this up. You can actually buy these Le Sac for a 3x4-inch Le Sac. It's only $10. You can order them on their web. And for a Le Flap, a 6x6 flap is only $25. And the way it works is you take your little vial of maggots that are impregnated in this mesh. You put this Le Flap down on the wound. You kind of cut out the center part where the wound is. You apply the maggots, then Le Flap seals over to keep the maggots from escaping. $25. You cannot go wrong. It's one of the best deals in medicine. So there is actually a video on applying Le Sac and Le Flap, so I recommend you check it out at monarchlabs.com. I have no financial affiliation. All right.
We'd like to thank our sponsor, Health One Continental Division, and Swedish Medical Center for their financial contributions to the EMM. Donations from them and listeners like you make it possible for us to fulfill our mission of producing and spreading free medical education to the masses. If you enjoy our show, please consider making a one-time or recurring donation to help cover our operational costs and keep the EMM awesome. Click on the link in our show notes to make a donation. Thank you for listening.